My name is Lola. But a child with autism might say something like, what is your name? They may also reverse pronouns. For example, if they want to go use the convenience, let me say, you want to go and eat, you want to go and use the toilet, they mix up pronouns, okay? That's the first major category. The second major category has to do with social interaction. They have a deficit, a reduction in their interactions with people in the society. And that begins from the home, the basic unit of the society. So you would find a parent return from work, this child would not approach parents to hug or welcome them or warm up to them.
They're not affectionate.
Not affectionate, yes. Unable to express their social needs. All right, need for social bonding. When they're in the midst of other children, they would rather stay by themselves and play by themselves and enjoy their company rather than go out, play with other children, hold them by the hand, drag them here and there. There is a problem with social interaction, initiating relationships and maintaining relationships. You know, when I'm talking to you, you look at my face, you maintain eye contact. That suggests to me that you are in this interaction with me.
Right.
Children with autism are largely unable to do that. All right. So that's one major feature. And
so that's the second.
The second.
So there are three.
Yeah, the second. And then the third is there is a pattern, a repetitive pattern, restricted behaviors, and they do them repeatedly. And this begins from the movements of their hands. For example, you may find them flapping their hands repeatedly, making funny hand movements again and again. Sometimes they tiptoe and they spin round and round on the same spot. And you find them arranging objects or toys in a particular order repeatedly. All right, you see them loving or just being unnecessarily attached to just particular sets of objects. It's just one toy in the house, for example. They just keep staying attached to it again and again. And they love routines. Things must be done in a particular way every now and then. If you make an attempt to disrupt that routine,
they'll throw a tantrum.
Third world war, if you ask me. A very, very bad tantrum, not your regular tantrum.
I know you said that the portrayal of autistic people in media is stereotypical, but honestly, it fits everything you've just described.
Oh, well.
I mean, it might not be limited to that, but that's, I don't know if you've seen the TV show The Good Doctor.
Oh, yes, I have.
You have?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Then. Okay.
Yeah. And then in addition to these, there are some of the symptoms that children with autism may exhibit. For example, they may have sensory difficulties with processing sensory information. That's just big grammar. For the five senses, they have difficulties taking in information into the five senses. And how do I mean? You hear my voice, I'm speaking softly, I hope. Maybe not as softly as Lola, but children with autism may not be able to process this, and you may find them stuffing their ears and interpreting this as too loud a noise for them. So you find them stuffing their ears. Other times you find them covering their eyes because the light appears to be too bright for them.
So it overstimulates them.
Absolutely. Yes. And then pain, sometimes they're unable to tolerate pain. Little pain gives them a lot of difficulty and distress. I've met a couple of children. I've had to attend a couple of children who've not had a haircut in years. Why? The sound of the clipper and the feel of the clipper running through their hair is distressing to them. So the distressing to the parents as well.
Something that's normal to every other
absolutely
child or person.
Yes. So it results from a difficulty processing information that comes through your five senses. That's the simplest way of putting it. Some children with autism also have these problems.
Interesting. Okay, so why do you think the United Nations chose a day to highlight the challenges of people with autism, or to promote awareness of autism, especially when there are countless mental, neurological, intellectual disorders? I mean, ADHD, OCD, multiple personality disorder, dyslexia, so much. So why autism specifically? Why? I mean, I understand that it's challenging based on everything you said, but why do you think there's all this fuss about autism?
Oh, yes. If you ask me, I'm not even sure we're doing well enough to make a lot of noise and create awareness about autism. All right. And this is because there is a lot of misinformation, falsehoods, myth, incorrect information, and stigma about autism. Right. As a matter of fact, among some cultures in West Africa, children who have autism are believed to be possessed of some spirit from the marine kingdom. And guess what happens? As the children grow older, the parents feel the burden of caring for them, not being able to communicate and reach out to them. It gets more difficult and straining on the parents, and they feel, look, from the river you came, from the river you're going. So they take these children, their own children, take them to the riverside and abandon them there. Since you're not going to communicate with us, perhaps let's drop you by the riverside, you communicate with the spirits there. You can imagine the torture, the pain. The mother who carried a baby for 9 months, father who was anticipating, and because of ignorance, falsehood, carries this child, go dumps them. As a matter of fact, in some cultures, they believe autism does not exist at all. And children who have such problems are tortured, called witches. This is one more reason why we need to create a lot of awareness. And then in societies that become increasingly aware of autism, access to treatment, they do not know where to get help. They feel, look, this is a death sentence, we're going to live with it for the rest of our lives. And then when they have access to treatment, or when they have what is supposedly access to treatment, it turns out a lot of the treatment options available are not evidence-based. They are just hearsay. This mother used this multivitamin for our child got better, autism taken care of. That's what's been bandied around. So there is more than enough reason for the UN to say, hey, there's a lot of falsehood, a lot of misinformation, a lot of havoc being done, not only on the children with autism, but also their family and their caregivers and the society at large. So
would you say it's a rare condition? Great,
Lola. This is one more reason why the UN is asking us to pick one day, as a matter of the whole month of April. It used to be believed that autism was rare. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until the 1980s that autism spectrum was recognized as a medical condition by the American Psychiatric Association just some 40 years ago. And it was believed to be extremely very rare then, but not anymore. As a matter of fact, it's believed that 1 in 68 to 100 children has autism spectrum disorders. What does this mean? If you walk into a primary school with about 200 children, you can be sure one of them most likely has autism spectrum. It's not that rare. Maybe not as common as you would expect for other illnesses, but it is not that rare, relatively common.
So the chances are that we all know someone who is living with autism.
Absolutely, if you ask me. Perhaps in your church, your mosque, your neighborhood, your community, or maybe as a little girl while you were in primary school, someone in your school perhaps had autism you didn't know.
Well, I'm recalibrating based on the information you fed us this morning to see if anyone I know could have possibly been living with autism. But rather than follow up on that, because that is a good that's a good path to take in asking about autism, the misinformation, some of the myths. I want us to first talk about causes, whether there is a cure, because that's what people want to know. People want to know whether it's like a lifelong condition, whether it can be prevented. Is there a known cause? Is there a risk factor? And all of this. You mentioned that from childhood, so that means one is born with it. So let's talk causes, whether it can be prevented and whether it can be cured.
Yeah, your choice of words fantastic. If there is a known cause, at the moment, all over the world, best of scientific research finding not a single known cause of autism spectrum disorders. You know, you can beat your chest and say, you can beat on your chest and say, hey, malaria is caused by Plasmodium falciparum. You can't do that.
No mosquitoes.
Well, not all mosquitoes bite lead to malaria, fever.
Right.
Those mosquitoes, the mosquitoes must be female, and Anopheles mosquito we call them. And they must have malaria parasite in them that they inject into your bloodstream.
I see.
Before you come down with malaria. Now, you can't say that when it comes to autism spectrum disorder. You can place your finger on one particular cause. No, it's not. Instead, what we know today, the best of scientific research all over the world, is that there are many risk factors that make children or make people vulnerable to autism spectrum disorder. Let me put that in a language all of us will understand. Say you live in Nigeria, for example. That makes it very, very likely. That puts you at a high risk of being dark complexioned. unlike if you live, say, in the UK or in the US, right? It doesn't mean that there are no fair complexion people in Nigeria or dark complexion in the UK. It just means that your chances of being, are higher here. Same with autism. When people meet some of those criteria, some of these conditions, their chances of coming down with autism are significantly higher than in the general population. And the first is family history. This simply means if there is a family member with autism spectrum disorder, there's a high likelihood that a sibling in that family will come down with autism compared with the general population. And it's higher, as a matter of fact, highest for twins.
Twins?
Yeah. In my practice, I've had to attend to a couple of twins who would have autism spectrum disorder. So, yeah, the thinking is that the same genetic process that led to autism in the first twin, remember, twins, identical twins in particular, share a very, very large amount of genetic material, may also be responsible for autism spectrum in the other twin. Same with the same family member. You, for example, share a larger proportion of genetic material with your siblings than you do with me. So if there is a trait in your family, it's more likely to be present in your siblings than it is likely to be present in me. So
Right.
it's the same with also, there is a genetic basis, some bit of hereditary in autism spectrum disorder. Now, this is not absolute, all right? Just means there's a higher likelihood of this happening. Another risk factor is what we call difficulties, complications around pregnancy, the time of birth, and soon after birth. The technical word for it is obstetric complications. That simply means for women who during pregnancy, they had, for example, gestational diabetes mellitus. That means they had diabetes that developed in the course of the pregnancy. This is not absolute. It just means the babies born by these mothers are a higher risk of coming down with autism. Women who bled during pregnancy, you call it placenta previa or placenta abruptio. Those are big technical terms that we have no business bothering ourselves with. The children are likely higher risk. And then children who have what we call extreme prematurity, children who were born prematurely, the brain not fully developed yet, they're a higher chance. And now, please don't this is not absolute, right? So don't say a man who gives birth when he's in his 40s or 50s, his children would have autism, and that's not absolute. It's just what science has shown as a higher risk. Mothers giving birth to children at an advanced age, likewise fathers, putting women in the family way at advanced ages, children born to parents of advanced age at a higher risk of coming down with autism spectrum disorders. That is not absolute, it's just what science. Now, these are some risk factors we've been able to find. And let me quickly debunk some myths, right? Some people say children will get vaccines, MMR vaccines, for example, it makes them come down with autism. That has been proven again and again to be absolutely incorrect. It is false. Now, some people also say it's your mother-in-law, it's village people, or you saw some spirit in the afternoon while you're pregnant, and that gave rise to autism. That is also equally incorrect. Just thought to clarify the risk factors for what we know as autism spectrum disorders.
There are so many other myths surrounding and rumors surrounding what could cause autism that one hears. First of all, one hears things like back in the day, in the time of our parents and grandparents, no one used to have all of these, that autism, not just autism, but like all the other, like ADHD and so on, that it is a modern invention, or that there's something those of us today are doing that is causing it. Maybe the chemicals we're ingesting, we're no longer living organically like our parents and our grandparents, and that's why you have so many more occurrences of autism and all the other disorders. So kindly speak to that, please.
Oh yes, that is largely incorrect when it comes to scientific basis, because even though autism was considered to be really very rare until some 40 years ago, soon after the Middle Ages, during the period of the Enlightenment, historically, there are a few historical accounts of some children that were described, and if you look at them today in terms of what we know as autism, they may have met the criteria for autism spectrum disorder. It just was that science wasn't advanced enough then to say these children had these conditions. Now, over time, even while everybody lived organically, children had these conditions, but they just, because of because the world lived in isolated communities, we didn't have a global village. Now, let me put this straight. You perhaps may not have seen a child with autism spectrum disorders before. I doubt if you have. We are quite familiar with what it is because the modern age technology has brought TV, media, entertainment to your phones in your pocket. So you are aware of what it was. But our grandparents who were in the villages, who never traveled perhaps beyond 2 hours radius, 2 or 3 kilometers radius beyond where they stay. So they may not know what was happening elsewhere. So a lot of information, a lot of awareness today and better diagnoses seem to have contributed to the supposed increasing number of people with autism, but it's always been there. We just didn't know it was there. We call them different things. Let me ask you some quick questions and perhaps they may be food for thought for us. There used to be twin killings in the past. Why? Why was there so? Who knew why? Was it perhaps, now this is me just asking a hypothetical question, was it perhaps because in some communities they saw some children who were born as twins, and as they grew older, they were hard. They didn't fit into the society, and then societies concluded all twins should be killed because if you allow them grow older, they turn out to be social misfit. Was it possible? Is it possible that was what happened? We don't know. But at the moment, there's no scientific basis for saying that
there's higher incidence rate of autism in people today than there used to be.
Oh, obviously there is, but the reasons popular social media attributes to it are incorrect. Yeah.
Right.
Better diagnosis now, better awareness. Rather than go dump your children in the villages or throw them by the riverside, you bring them to the hospital, you seek help. So we just included that in the number of diagnoses we have. That contributes to increase.
I can imagine how the society of the past, of let's say the 80s or the 70s or even the 90s, would have handled a child who exhibited some of these traits that you explained, not being able to meet your eyes. You're talking to a child, even in Yoruba culture, if you're talking to a child and they're looking away, that's considered disrespectful.
Absolutely.
And with no prior knowledge of behavior like that, I can imagine them, just chalking it up to the child being strange.
Absolutely.
Or maybe even being magically possessed.
Absolutely.
So yes, as you said, people would have just ascribed different sinister, reasons to it as opposed to what it actually was. Now, you didn't answer whether it could be cured.
Oh yes. Well, let's talk a bit of the philosophy of medicine right now. The word cure is a rather very technical word. As a matter of fact, in medicine today, very few diseases can be cured in the sense of the word cure. Perhaps the word eradication is a better word. And by this, I mean the infectious disease. For example, polio, for example, smallpox. They've been totally eradicated. We're almost totally eradicated for polio, but you don't hear of them anymore. So if you're talking about cure, and by cure you mean non-recurrence, very few disorders today can be cured. For example, if you talk about malaria being cured, I'll take a second look at whoever is saying that, because if you expect malaria to be totally cured, you shouldn't come down with malaria again for the rest of your life. Or you come down with malaria again, so what happened to malaria the first time? So you were managed, if you ask me. Exactly. Same with diabetes. If you tell me you had diabetes and you've been cured, I'll take a second look at you. Are you sure what you're talking about? Or you got hypertension and you're totally cured? Excuse me? All right. So, philosophically speaking, most medical conditions have been managed today. You see me putting on corrective glasses. Are you saying my corrective errors have been cured? No, been managed. So, bringing this philosophy to the subject of autism spectrum disorder is the same we do for autism spectrum disorder. We manage these conditions. And is there hope for our management of this? Yes, there is. Children who first are identified early. Oh yes, you pick them early, the age of 3, the age of 4, you're able to identify them and you begin interventions as soon as you identify them. Research and experience have shown that these children get better with time. And what we hope to accomplish with these children is reduce the intensity of these problems, these three major problems I mentioned
So
earlier.
they're better at speech and language. They're better at social interaction.
Absolutely.
There's less of those repetitive, restrictive patterns.
Absolutely. And more importantly, ultimately, of what use is communicating better, interacting better if you don't reach your full potentials? It's absolutely meaningless. More importantly, you want to help those children reach their potentials as humans.
Okay.
Good, send them to school, help them get a career, get married, have children, and lead a normal life.
They can integrate better into society.
Absolutely.
Okay, this morning we are talking autism. Last Wednesday, 2nd of April, was World Autism Awareness Day. And you mentioned that all month of April is about
World
autism.
Awareness Month, yeah.
Wow, interesting. Okay, so we're still very much in theme. And this morning we're learning all there is to know about autism from Dr. Emmanuel Abayomi. He's a child and adolescent psychiatrist at the Neuropsychiatric Hospital, Arrow. And if you have questions or you have something you want to add to our conversation this morning, you can send us a message on WhatsApp 0817 555 1067, or you can comment on our Facebook live stream. Good news, Facebook is now live, so you can go there, watch and comment. Splash FM 106.7 is our page, or you can tweet at Splash FM 1067 on X. Don't forget the hashtag Panorama on Splash. You mentioned early detection helping to better manage the symptoms of autism, or
Yes.
how it manifests. So how early can it be detected? As a parent, at what point can you breathe easy and say, oh, my child doesn't possibly have autism? When do you start to worry? I also say this because I know of someone who, when the child was around 3 or so, he wasn't talking audibly enough. So at that age, his age mates were already like able to say certain words somewhat clearly, but he was still doing baby talk, like baby gibberish.
Yeah, babbling.
Exactly, babbling. And then he also liked to play by himself a lot. Like, he didn't need other people to amuse him. You just leave him, give him something. He could occupy himself for, at length. And his parents had started to worry. They were already asking around, they weren't sure yet whether to. But I know this child now. This child is now fully grown. This was several years ago. And this child is normal. Like, well, not that autistic children aren't normal, but like, this child is now
interacting.
Exactly. You wouldn't know that at 3, he had not yet met certain developmental milestones. So that's a case of someone whose parents could possibly have said, oh, seeing as he has 2 of these traits that are unusual, maybe he has autism. So at what age can you begin to tell that, whether it's just a delay that will right itself in time, or it could possibly be a precursor to knowing that they have autism?
Yes, thank you, Lola. Let me answer your question directly. I would say that if by age 3, right, you notice that your child is having some delay in speech, making sentences, communicating with you, maintaining eye contact with you, and then making gestures, you find this child would not extend his hands to have you carry him or carry her, warm up to you, smile at you when you smile back at you when you smile at him, in the midst of other children, would not want to associate with them, would not want to touch other people. He's just lost, so to speak, in his own world, or make some funny movement. Now, don't panic. Do not panic. It's just okay sometimes to seek help. Just ask questions. And if you go on Google will give you loads and loads of information and scare the life out of you. So I want to advise you do that. Just seek help. Now, when you seek professional help, and I've had to do that countless number of times, parents who come into my consulting room distressed that they saw some symptoms, they searched on Google, and boom, their child has autism spectrum disorders.
Right.
And then I do a thorough evaluation, and then, hey, madam, there is nothing wrong with your child. I'll tell you a story that, it's quite amusing, because how I arrived at that was really, really very fun and exciting. A woman had brought her son who was 4 years old, and then she said a child had autism. Why would you say that? That look, is 4, he's yet to start talking, is this, what else? Well, he plays with other children, but he's yet to start talking at 4, he has autism. And I laughed at, man, I'm sorry for laughing, but this is not sufficient. She said, no, she's sure. I said, okay, where's your husband? Is your husband aware you are here at the hospital? She said, no, he's not aware. Why? Because the husband laughed at her every time he told her the son had autism. So she came behind his back and promised. So, I'd like you to do something unusual. Call your husband right now and put the phone on speaker. And then she did. And I said, sir, young man, how are you? So just answer a few questions, sir. How old were you when you started talking as a little boy? And the man laughed that he was 5 when he started talking. And
that's why he wasn't bothered.
Yeah, so that's why I wasn't bothered. So just help the woman realize sometimes some children actually
just
take a while before they start talking. And then I would see the woman in a few years' time afterwards, the boy could just not stop talking.
To compensate for the
lost time it took him to start talking. Yeah, so parents, be concerned. You need not panic unnecessarily and lose sleep because your child has some behaviors, some features that are disturbing before the age of 3. But as from the age of 3, by age of 4, if you're still not comfortable, seek professional help.
What does a thorough evaluation from you look like? Because autism is a neurological disorder, I believe. So are there tests like a CT scan, an MRI? I don't know what those are, but all those fancy equipment that you put there. So is this something that you can look into their brain and see that it doesn't look like what a normal brain, in quotes, would look like? Or is it based on behavior that you diagnose?
Yeah, great question. MRI, CT scan, they are machines very high spec machines you use to look into people's brains. Now we also have equipment, all right? They are trained. These equipments are like trained minds, structured sets of questions we use to observe these children, assess them, ask questions from their parents. It's quite thorough and comprehensive. As a matter of fact, at the hospital where I work, Neuropsychiatric Hospital, Abayomi, we have an instrument, and I think we're the only center in Nigeria at the moment that has the instrument. All right, we use it to do a comprehensive evaluation of children who have autism. So autism is not something you just go pick up a checklist from Google on the internet, and then you just tick. There is need for a thorough, comprehensive evaluation by trained experts.
Like yourself?
Yes, like myself, before you say, and of course my boss, the provost and medical director at the hospital.
So a psychiatrist?
Absolutely, a psychiatrist. In addition to a psychiatrist, pediatric neurologist who have had training in autism assessment and diagnosis. Yeah, not just any pediatric, but those who have had trainings can also make such diagnoses.
Okay, all right. We're going to get to the phone lines shortly, but you can send in your comments, your questions to us on WhatsApp 0817-555-1067. You can also comment on our Facebook live stream, Splash FM 106.7, or tweet at Splash FM 1067 on X, #Panorama on Splash. Now, my final question before we head to the phone lines. Well, I have more questions, but I want to allow other people to ask questions of theirs or, contribute, is that there's been a lot of focus so far in our conversation on children. But I imagine, especially since you said that it can only be managed, so I imagine that, even when you're managing it, or if maybe the child escapes diagnosis, they live with it, they grow up with it. Somehow, even though maybe they are probably bullied and people think them strange, they live with it until their 30s, their 40s, their 50s. So can adults be diagnosed? Is it possible that, you have adults whose parents, they don't know too much, or maybe they grew up in a time when, there wasn't a lot of knowledge or awareness about autism, and so they escaped diagnosis all their lives, and now they are 40, 50. Like now, someone is listening and is like, what Dr. Abayomi is saying sounds like how my grandmother used to act, or it sounds like my auntie or my uncle or my father. It sounds like this were some of the things they used to do. It's possible they could have had autism. So can a full-grown adult in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s still be diagnosed to have autism spectrum disorder?
Thank you, Lola. Please permit me to answer your question indirectly by coming from the angle of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I see a lot of young people, investing in the graduates, who reach out to me. Hey, doctor, I have ADHD. And I say, please tell me, how did you arrive at that? And they really had a number of symptoms they read up from the internet. And I said, okay, just one question. When did you notice that you started having this problem? So I started having them 2 years ago. I said, come off it, you're kidding, man. You can't have ADHD. Same for autism spectrum disorders. Now, you can't wake up at age 30 and say, hey, 5 years ago, I noticed I had difficulty with my speech and language communication. I started noticing that. I started noticing the withdrawal into my shell, cutting off toxic people and loving my own company, not interacting with other people. Notice that I now do some rituals. Come on, you got nothing. You got no autism whatsoever. The key word here is the symptoms must have been observed before the age of 3 years. So whether you were missed as a child or you were not missed, the important thing is, when did you notice this problem? So I noticed that when I was 10 years old. All right, let's get a family member. When he was 1, when he was 2, did he notice any such thing? No, he was fine. He was doing well, absolutely fine. What he's saying to you now that he noticed when he was 10 years old, we have no idea what he's talking about. You may have a problem really, but it is not autism spectrum disorder.
So it must have manifested in childhood.
Yes.
And there must be a family member to attest to that.
Not necessarily. Corroboratory accounts. Because before the age of 3, I'm not sure you knew what was happening to you.
Exactly. Because I'm pretty sure even up to the age of like maybe 5, 6, I don't remember.
Yeah, that's understandable. So it's called a neurodevelopmental disorder for that same reason. It's a disorder of development, right? So it comes with development as you grow in from childhood.
Okay, phone lines are now open. You can call in and be a part of our conversation on autism this morning. You can call the phone numbers 0817 444 1067, or you can call 0705 050 1067. The goal is to spread awareness about autism. So if there are any lingering questions in your mind or an area that you seek clarity on, you can call in to ask. 0705 050 1067 or call 0817 444 1067. You can also drop us a comment on our Facebook live stream. Splash FM 106.7 is where you find the live stream, or you can text us on WhatsApp 0817 555 1067 or tweet at Splash FM 1067 with the hashtag Panorama on Splash. I imagine that autism must complicate parent-children relationships, especially because of cultural norms here in Africa, here in Nigeria specifically, or even here in the Southwest, even more specifically, because like it or not, parents have certain expectations of us as children or even as adults. They want you to be outgoing. They want you to be extroverted. So sorry, we lost that call. Do call us back, 0705 0517 444 1067. So back to what I was saying. I have lived with or spent time with some of my family matriarchs and patriarchs, and I know that there's a certain way they want you to be. Like, they want you to be sociable. They want you to have courtesies, niceties. They prioritize if you don't have them, it's a problem. I'm going to continue with the rest of my question, but let's take this call in the meantime. Hello, good morning.
Hello.
What's your name? Where are you calling from? Hello. Sorry about that. Bring us back. 0817 444 1067 0705 050 How can we navigate this aspect of our cultural norms and expectations in better helping parents and children understand, how to coexist when the child has autism?
Yeah, great question you've asked, Lola. And there is another aspect to these. Perhaps you touch on it later on. It's the spousal relationship, the impact of the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder on the child, on the relationship between the parents. I've had cases of parents filing for divorce, separating, father separate because he felt, look, there's nobody in my family with a child with this kind of condition. So where did you get this child from? Mother-in-laws, mothers-in-law, daughters-in-law, family put into law discord and unnecessary quarrels and difficulties because of this diagnosis. Now, the point is, a diagnosis of autism is not only traumatic and devastating, on the parents, equally devastating on the larger family involved in this case. So how do we navigate this? For the mothers in particular, well, in early childhood, these children do not seem to be aware, because by age 2, 3, you do not seem to be fully aware of what's happening around you. Of course, as they grow older, they begin to see that they are different, especially if the society discriminates against them. They begin to experience low self-esteem and begin to have problems with depression and anxiety.
And that would worsen their autism symptoms, right?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, research has shown that in adolescence and later years, anxiety and depression are the most common conditions that now add on to an original diagnosis of autism. Just makes matters worse.
Please hold that thought. Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
What's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Nicholas. Lola. Good morning, Dr. Emmanuel.
Go on, please.
Yeah, Dr. Emmanuel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Nicholas. Good morning.
I want to thank you very much. Because I know you would make more money being in UK, US, or Canada. For you to still be here with us, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Nicholas.
Dr. Emmanuel, I'm primarily a geneticist. And like Sanusi would say, that he's an economist. So he speaks numbers, property. So in genetics, we talk about alleles, dominants, codons, epistasis, and co. But I want to disagree with you slightly. You talk about the fact that you manage diseases. But I believe you can only but you have to manage glaucoma. I was asthmatic as a boy. In fact, the first time I was in FMC was because I had an asthmatic bout, but I'm no longer asthmatic. But let us look at the environment. I don't know whether you remember speciation. Like there's more malaria crisis than in Arctic Australia. But beyond that, what do you think is the efforts of the government in improving the health industry? Dr. Emmanuel, I know you know that it was because Anne Sullivan was already a master from the Peking School of the Blind that she could help Helen Keller.
All right,
Helen Keller
Nicholas.
was blind, to still relate with the blind. What is the government budget on health? As rich as we are, because this is a serious topic.
All right, Nicholas. You need to hurry up.
You know, like the Gates we say, we spend more billions on tummy talks and research for badness, while malaria and polio is claiming more lives.
Correctly, Nicholas, you would like to know what the government is doing in the healthcare sector to help improve the well-being of the society. Oh yes, at the moment I can tell you free of charge that the government is doing a lot. And then it's important that we smell the coffee and know that there is a limit to just how much the government can do. And that's why we have people like you, Nicholas, we have people like you, Splash FM. This is not the government, for example. This is a private radio station creating awareness. So there's a whole lot all of us putting hands together, working hand in hand can do to help uplift the healthcare of the citizenry in this country. So Nicholas, bring in your knowledge as a geneticist, get private philanthropists and donors. Let's work together, work hand in hand, create a lot of awareness. Let's send in your policy papers, lobby the government, vote people into power who can help improve the health of the citizenry. I think that's what we should be doing at the moment.
Is there any government intervention on autism?
Absolutely. Yes, there is. The government partners with some private individuals. As a matter of fact, on the 2nd of April at Eagle Square in Abuja, there was an awareness campaign that was held. The NTE was involved and some government parastatals were also involved. The Federal Ministry of Health, Ministry of Information, And Federal Ministry of Education was also involved at that event.
Okay, so you were answering my question before Nicholas's call, so please just quickly. My question about parent-children navigating there.
Oh yes,
and then
now
cultural norms.
yes, great. Now there are 3 ways to helping parents, children, and society navigate all of this, and then I'll start with the society. Now the society should come to realize that stigmatizing people, labeling people, discriminating them, and isolating them, or even judging them harshly for what is not as a result of any fault of theirs is not helping them. For that drives people downhill into whatnot. So the society should be a bit more accepting, more understanding, get knowledge. If you're not sure what's happening, get educated, get information, and accept people, show love, show compassion to parents of children with autism spectrum. That's one thing society can do. Now to parents should be less hard on themselves. It's not their fault that their children have got autism, and they should moderate their expectations from their children. I know it's difficult, it's easier said than done. When you remember that your child is 6 years old right now, and your neighbor's child, who's equally 6 years old, seems to be doing fantastically well in school, has friends, socializing, but your own child just keeps to himself. That can be a bit difficult. I understand how hard this is, but let's understand that this child has got a medical condition, and this child has his own struggles. This child needs to be understood. So parents, moderate your expectations, maintain perspective that each child is different. This can help reduce the unnecessary pain and burden parents bear on themselves. And then there is hope with interventions. Losing sleep, worrying thoughts unnecessarily over the condition will not help. Take steps, take action, seek help, seek interventions.
And just accept that your child will never, don't judge them by the same metrics you're judging every other child.
Absolutely.
They are different. Doesn't mean they're abnormal. They're just different.
Absolutely. And then children who have autism, of course, they can hear nothing is wrong with their hearing. They can hear. Look, understand.
And they're often gifted in other areas.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just that we not understand. A good number of them become quite exceptional in some fields, and they do exceptionally well. So just understand that you got this condition. It's not the end of the world. It's not a death sentence. With interventions and help and support, we can reduce the burden of these problems on you, and we can also work with you and help you reach your potential. You can go on to become whatever you want to become. With some difficulty, I understand, but we can still get there.
All right. Please spare us an additional couple of minutes after the break. We're about to embark on a commercial break. We have some questions here sent in. You can still send in your questions if you have them, or whatever you'd like to add to the show to our WhatsApp. You can choose to be anonymous, because I understand that you may consider this to be vulnerable. It may be a bit of a vulnerable issue, a touchy issue for you. So you can choose to be anonymous when you send in your message on WhatsApp. WhatsApp is 0817-555-1067. I'll be back after this commercial break. Please stay with us.
Talk radio. I listen to a lot of talk radio.
I like talk radio.
Welcome to your number one talk radio station.
Fasten your seatbelts.
This is your favorite station. Splash FM 106.7.
Tàbá ń sọ̀rọ̀ ice block making machine nílẹ̀ yìí, ọ̀gá àgbà ni Master Sam Cool Engineering Company. Master Sam Cool mọ̀ nípa bá a ti ń ṣe àgbékalẹ̀ ice block making machine láti bẹ̀rẹ̀ dópin. Àwọn fridge àti freezer yín tẹ́ ẹ ti lò wọ́n pàtì. Ẹ lè sọ di ice block making machine. Bákan náà làwọn ice block machine yín tí kò ṣiṣẹ́ mọ́ tàbí tí kò ṣe bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣe fẹ́. Master Sam Cool á bá yín sọ di tuntun tí ẹ ó tún lò fún àìmọye ọdún. Lẹ́jẹ̀ wọ́n bẹ́ẹ̀ bá ṣe fẹ́ sí tàbí customize ice block pẹ̀lú ìrànlọ́wọ́ Master Sam Cool Engineering Company. Kò sẹ́ni tí kò nílò ice block. Ìwọ náà bẹ̀rẹ̀ okòwò ice block lónìí. Kówó máa wọlé fún ọ. Master Sam Cool wà ní 463 Abẹ́òkúta Expressway Ajégúnlẹ̀ bus stop nílùú Èkó, tàbí ní 32 Bíúrì Láfẹnwá Abẹ́òkúta, tàbí nínú ọjà Láfẹnwá lórí Gbẹ́gi. Ẹ pè 08066303532 lẹ́ẹ̀kan sí 08066303532.
We are ultimate landmark schools. for a top-notch learning experience. We have qualified professionals, state-of-the-art facilities to make learning beautiful. We are ultimate. We are ultimate. We are ultimate landmark school.
Ultimate Landmark Schools. Ètò ìgbaniwọlé ń lọ lọ́wọ́ sí kindergarten, nursery, primary, college àti ẹ̀kọ́ ìmọ̀ iṣẹ́ ọwọ́ vocational skills acquisition. Ní yàrá ìkàwé tó dára, computer room, science laboratory, music department tó gbàgbàmù, library tó dúró déédéé, ibi ìṣeré ìdárayá, ọkọ̀ ilé ìwé wà, boarding facilities náà gbẹ̀yìn. Àwọn ọmọ wa sì ń ṣe dáadáa nínú ìdánwò UTME. Ní àwa WAEC NECO government approved. Ìdánwò common entrance máa wáyé ní May 24, June 28 àti July 19, 2025. Ultimate Landmark Schools wà ní Láfẹ̀nwá Abẹ́òkúta Ògùn State àti ní Blessed River Basin Estate, Àdéhùn Abẹ́òkúta Ògùn State. Telephone 0803-536-8194 tàbí 0813-642-7488. Ultimate Landmark School. In God we trust.
Follow who know road, they say. That's why I always stay close to Auntie Bola. Recently, she's been talking about something big. OG Step.
With OG Step, I have received intensive training in STEM education, which is training on how to use science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to solve real-life problems. It is helping our students. OG Step is also renovating 8 technical colleges across Ogun State.
Wow! OG Step?
Yes, OG Step. Ogun State Economic Transformation Project. Beyond education, it is transforming different sectors. In agriculture, over 22,160 farmers have been fully assisted. Its public service reforms have birthed an e-procurement platform for Ogun State. The Ogun State government, through OG Step, has also given out 12,000 certificates of occupancy out of the 15,000 targets to businesses and individuals.
OG Step!
OG Step, improving the economic livelihood of all Ogun.
Ìgbéga ìpínlẹ̀ Ògùn, àjọṣe gbogbo wa ni.
A ti fẹ́ ṣe o. Ọjọ́ ti pé tá a máa ṣe. Ó yá gbogbo ẹ̀yin olùgbé Òkè Mọ̀sán, Ládẹrin àti gbogbo agbègbè tó yí ká. Ẹ kú àmójúbà ilé oúnjẹ tuntun tí Mádùjútìmí Olúwa Foods gbé kalẹ̀ lọ́nà àrà. Sókè Mọ̀sán. Ọpọ́n ti sún finally. Torí onírúurú oúnjẹ tilẹ̀ yí àti tòkè òkun. Ilé oúnjẹ Mádùjútìmí Olúwa máa fi tẹ̀yìn lọ́rùn dọ́ba. Ìyẹn lókè Mọ̀sán. Ẹ̀yin ní ẹ̀jẹ̀ àjọ ká. Ó kọjọ́ mélòó báyìí tá a máa ṣe. Ṣé fẹ́ gbọ́ ọjọ́ Friday, April 18 gangan. Bẹ̀rẹ̀ láago 2 ọ̀sán. Láyẹyẹ ṣíṣí ilé oúnjẹ tuntun míì tí Mádùjútìmí Olúwa ṣí sí MKO Trade Fair Complex beside Immigration Office Òkè Mọ̀sán Abẹ́òkúta. Ìlàjì péré nínú owó oúnjẹ tẹ́ ẹ bá rà lọ́jọ́ yẹn lẹ máa sanwó ẹ̀. Ọ̀kan òjọ̀kan ní ìgbádùn tó wà nílẹ̀ fún gbogbo àwọn oníbàárà tán bá tètè dé. Ọjọ́ yẹn máa dùn gan ni. Ọmọ tán sọ ìràwọ̀ ńlá number 1 Aláyọ̀ Melody Singer tó máa lùlù àlùjọ.
Àtàndá ló kọrin ọba Aláyọ̀ Singer o. Àtàndá ló kọrin ọba the global legend.
Mádùjútìmí Olúwa First, dishing out the best considering your budget.
Don't dare touch that dial. It's Splash, your integrity station.
Panorama.
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 Panorama. Panorama.
Panorama on Splash 106.7 FM.
Welcome back. It's Panorama on Splash 106.7 FM. My name is Lola Meduteni. Right now it's 9:31 a.m. and we just got done talking about autism. If you missed it, you can still catch up on Facebook. The live stream will be available as a video on our Facebook page, Splash FM 106.7 FM. Splash FM 106.7, I mean. However, we do have some messages sent in on WhatsApp, so let's quickly get to them. I think there are questions here that Dr. Abayomi will answer before he leaves. Ken Paul says, kudos to the guests. Does Parkinson disorder and autism have connections in the cerebral? If yes, which one can best be managed? Or how can they best be managed, you mean? All right, that's one question. Victor from Birmingham says, I don't think there has been any research that shows the cause of autism, but they mostly have one thing in common, which is seizures and anxiety. 7 in 10 of autistic people are epileptic. And I don't believe autism is genetic, like your guest has said. And you may not be far from the truth if you think the reason is because of what we consume. The processed foods, processed drinks, the chemicals we use, the air we breathe. All this could be rumored to be the reason for increase of autistic people that we have today. Some of the symptoms could have been managed better while the baby was growing up, but negligence and ignorance of the parents could make the issue worse. I've worked with autistic children back in Nigeria, both in the north and in the east, but I understood better when I moved here. I would recommend a movie for you, Lola, to watch. Toxic Town on Netflix. Maybe you will have a different view on autism. I think my view is pretty okay, but thank you, Victor. Nicholas is here on WhatsApp and he says, after all is said and done, more is said than done. We're very lackadaisical with science, research, and technology in this nation. Autistic kids mysteriously can be very intelligent as compared to what we may term normal kids. I'm not too comfortable with the American Psychiatric Association on some issues. Their liberalization made them delist a lot of what was abnormal into what we now term woke. African psychiatry should be more concerned with synergizing psychiatry with African values. A time to remember why the Nigerian Anglican Communion left the Church of England. Ayodeji Famogbele says, I'm really enjoying the discourse. Although I do not know what the topic is because I joined quite late, but I know it's about autism. Can the guest help shed some light on the issue of developmental delays due to autism compared with developmental delays due to other conditions such as cerebral palsy? I know they could be similar and one should be able to get the dividing line. Secondly, can you share the contact of the guest with me to ask some other personal questions? Thank you. If he allows, I'll send it to you privately, but you should be aware that it will come at a fee because he doesn't do this for free after all. And this next question, the final one on WhatsApp says, okay, I'm going to leave out your name because I think you're asking a question that's a bit personal, but this person says, my sister's first son seems to be having a speech delay. He plays alone and with the mom most of the time. He's free with the mom, so I don't think he isolates himself. What do we call this? Did you get all of the questions? All right, so let's quickly address them.
Right, thank you very much, listeners, for your wonderful questions. About the question about Parkinson's and autism spectrum disorders, I think these two conditions are on two extremes of the spectrum of age. Autism you find in children, Parkinson's in the older population. People.
Is it also a neurological disorder, Parkinson's?
Yes, it is a neurological disorder, and they're entirely different when it comes to the architecture, the brain architecture behind them. Parkinson's has to do with stability and the movement. Stability and movement in people who otherwise have led a fairly normal life from childhood until adulthood, normal, and then later in life, at the part of the brain called the cerebellum, they begin to have some problems, and there are other conditions, there are other structures in the brain, you call that the brain stem, right? So they have some problems in there. Unlike in autism, science is yet to precisely isolate the part of the brain where the problem is, and it begins in childhood.
Okay.
So there are two different conditions. Now, about the man from Birmingham who expressed his views about autism not being genetic. Oh yes, I understand that science is advancing, science is growing. I just shared with you what we have with respect to latest scientific evidence. Of course, in what we call evidence-based medicine, in science, in psychiatry, in all of medicine today, there is a concept of evidence-based medicine where all the evidences we have are put on a pyramid, and at the bottom of this pyramid, now this pyramid in terms of the weight of the evidence is not bottom heavy, it's heavy at the top, but at the bottom where the weight usually carries very little weight is opinion, expert opinion. So even if I'm expert and I come and share my opinion, scientifically speaking, it carries very little weight. So you could have 1,000 experts in the room and they all have different opinions.
Right, it's just conjecture.
It's just conjectures. Now, when you subject our individual opinions to research, to randomized control down, it means you do research and you blind yourself, you are not sure of the outcome. And then you now publish, you now review all these from different researchers all over the world. Over time, you now share that information. That carries a lot more weight than individual opinions.
And does the same apply to his theory about processed foods, processed drinks, the chemicals?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, about the American Psychiatric Association, I understand you have your reservations about them. I also have my reservations about the American Psychiatric Association. But then until we come up with something better, peer-reviewed, that stands the test of time, we can't just throw around our private opinions and expect them to carry as much weight as what has been published. And never forget the American Psychiatric Association with its instrument, its book, its manual, diagnostic manual, we call it the DSM-5, undergoes repeated reviews and updating. So I think
so it's the best we've got right now.
It's the best we've got right now, and it keeps getting better. What we're using right now is the 5th edition. This time with the first edition, and it keeps getting better. So what I would ask, rather than engage on this back and forth conversation, what I would ask is go ahead and conduct research and publish. The American Psychiatric Association, in their next edition, will see the outcome of your research. They will subject it to further repeats in other parts of the world, and if it's the best we've got so far, that will be included. We can't take the path of the Anglican Communion, all right, and say no. There is a whole world of difference between science and religion. All right, you fund religion from your offerings without being coerced, and you give freely. You can take such decisions. But when it comes to science, no, you can't just do that. There's nobody funding, for example, the Nigerian Association of Psychiatrists, for example, and giving us funding to do research. No, we don't have such. So we work with what we have at the moment. About developmental delays due to autism spectrum disorders and that conditions, this is a very, very significant question. And
specifically cerebral palsy.
Specifically cerebral palsy, yes. And I'd like you to recall, if you listened in at the beginning of my talk, the core problems of autism spectrum disorders, right? Not necessarily delays. Delay is one of them, but it's not major, all right? It's deficit of speech. They may even have some speech, but it's not as much as it should be. And even if it is much, I told you about repeating the same things you say, all right? And then I talked about lack of nonverbal communication. Now, they may have delay in speech, but that's about it. There's no delay in motor development. In cerebral palsy is primarily a disorder of motor. I mean the bones, the muscles, and the movement. Unlike autism, that is primarily a disorder of social interaction and social communication. So if there's delay in autism, it is never, maybe never is rather too strong. It is very, very unlikely to have to do with movement. How do I mean? A child who has autism most likely will sit when he's expected to sit, crawl when he's expected to crawl, and walk when he's expected. There will be no delays in that. The delay you would observe instead would be in the area of speech and communication.
So that doesn't really affect them physically, their physical development.
Excellent, absolutely.
Unlike cerebral palsy,
that you notice the muscles are weak, they're unable to sit, they're 2 years old, they have to attain neck control. All right, now children who have cerebral palsy may have excellent social interaction with their family members. So it's important to tell that apart. And again, what we're sharing with you on here is not sufficient reason to arrive at a diagnosis. If you're in doubt, you're not sure exactly what's happening, you can always come for a comprehensive evaluation.
That brings us to the final question. I don't know whether it's one that would be subject to a comprehensive evaluation, but the person was asking if about the sister's first son that seems to be having a speech delay, plays alone and with the mom, is very free with the mom, so the person doesn't think he isolates himself. Could it be grounds to suspect autism? Obviously, you cannot tell with certainty, but is it enough for them to come for an evaluation?
Not necessarily, except if the mother gets bothered a lot more. But perhaps a few more questions you may want to answer if you're listening to me. This child plays only with the mom or plays with other children? Plays, what about father? Warms up to them, right? Does this child stick to some routines and it's war? Throws a very bad tantrum when you try to take them off those routines. Are there repetitive behaviors this child engages in? Are there sensory problems this child exhibits? If not, then it's just perhaps a normal child who perhaps is experiencing some delay in achieving his milestones. But if this persists beyond the age of 4 or 5, there will be no harm if you bring this child for an evaluation.
Okay. Wow, thank you very much, Dr. Emmanuel Abayomi, child and adolescent psychiatrist at the Neuropsychiatric Hospital, Aro. Someone asked for your contact, so maybe we'll discuss that off air if they want it. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been a very illuminating conversation this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And that concludes our bit on autism awareness this morning. We'll take a short break and I'll be back with the newspapers. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Panorama on Splash 106.7 FM. It's time to check out the newspapers. I have Vanguard and Nigerian Tribune. Here's what we have on each of their respective front pages. On the front page of Nigerian Tribune, youths defy police warning, stage protest in Lagos, Abuja, Rivers, Ibadan, others. Federal government on Saudi ban, Nigeria not affected. UBEC disburses 22 billion naira to states for training of 224,000 teachers. The latest on CNG, federal government attracts $491 million investment, unveils plan to expand penetration in 30 states. APC governors visit Buhari in Kaduna, say the party is stable ahead of 2027. Naira under pressure amid global tariff tensions. Operators predict low earnings for Nigeria, cheaper petrol pump price as oil price crash. Economic management team to review all scenarios, advise federal government, says the finance minister. Also says effect on exports will be negligible. Labour Party crisis. Abure's leadership threatens sanctions against Obi Oti ahead of parallel NEC meeting. On Plateau killings, military to deploy more troops to troubled communities. GNI condemns killings. There are pictures of youths carrying placards for the protests that held yesterday on the front page of Nigerian Tribune. Meanwhile, Vanguard's lead story, Cybercrime Act, emergency rule protest. Police protesters clash in Abuja, Port Harcourt. Rivers police denies firing tear gas at protesters, arresting journalist. Protest in Lagos, Osun peaceful. Minister backs protests, warns against destruction of national infrastructure. And attached are pictures of the protest in Abuja, in Rivers, in Lagos, in Oyo. Afe Babalola to National Assembly, stop approving substandard varsities. U.S. Law Institute tasks Tinubu to reverse Fubara suspension. On global tariff war, Edun says federal government will review impact on Nigeria, U.S., China, at daggers drawn as Trump threatens Beijing with extra 50% tariff. On Labour Party crisis, Abure, Obi, Oti summon parallel NEC meetings. There's a picture of the World Health Organization country representative visiting the First Lady and presenting a souvenir of World Health Day. World Health Day was yesterday. I mentioned that at the State House, Abuja, yesterday. And those are the headlines. A final paper to check before we go deeper in detail. Platform Times front page. JAMB uncovers 585 forged A-level certificates, 4 arrested. 13 fake IJMB cases under probe. Crisis deepens the Labour Party as Abure wants Obi Oti, no leadership vacancy. Ondo tertiary staff give Governor Ayedatiwa 14-day ultimatum over wage exclusion. Broadcasting body, Anbrod, Mons, Olunloyo, Adeojo, hails enduring legacies. Nigeria, Saudi Arabia sign MOU to deepen war against drug trafficking. Presidency denies sacking of INEC chairperson Mahmoud Yakubu. Ogun Attorney General Ogungbade sued for 1 billion naira over alleged defamation. Saudi Arabia denies imposing visa ban on Nigeria and 13 other countries. Ogun Monarch says Ooni Alaafin must manage superiority crisis. Police uncover baby factory, rescue 10 victims, arrest 3 operators. Finally, on the front page of Platform Times, mystery thunder kills 8 cows in Ondo. All right, let's begin with how the protest went down in Lagos, Abuja, Rivers, and Oyo. That's on page 5 of Vanguard newspaper. The police and protesters clashed in Abuja and Port Harcourt yesterday during the protest declared by the Take It Back movement against the Cybercrime Act and the emergency rule imposed on Rivers State last month by the federal government, which resulted in the suspension of democratic structures in the state. The protest in Lagos, Osun, and some parts of the country was, however, devoid of any clash between both parties. It will be recalled that Force headquarters had warned against the protest on Sunday, saying it is ill-timed, but organizers insisted the protest must hold to compel government to stop bullying citizens with the Cybercrime Act and also reverse the suspension of democratic structures in Rivers State. The protesters in Abuja turned out in their numbers in the early hours of yesterday, despite efforts made by police to stop their procession. They marched to the National Assembly, where they met an empty complex due to the ongoing recess of lawmakers, scheduled to resume on the 29th of April. The protest, led by the Take It Back movement and several CSOs, coincided with Police Day celebrations at Eagle Square, and it was learned that this increased the desperation of police to stop it. Although the protest began peacefully, it soon degenerated into chaos when police operatives fired tear gas canisters to disperse the crowd. Many demonstrators were seen fleeing the scene as the atmosphere remained charged. At the time of filing these reports, there were no confirmed reports of injuries or arrests. Despite this, the protest leaders maintained that the demonstration was necessary to draw attention to the daily hardship faced by Nigerians, particularly in light of rising inflation, persistent insecurity, and perceived government repression. Some of the protest leaders include presidential candidates of Action Alliance in the 2023 elections, Omoyele Sowore, and human rights activist Deji Adeyanju. And they also identify the emergency rule in Rivers as one of the reasons for the protest. In Port Harcourt, Rivers State operatives of NPF also attacked protesters with tear gas canisters around Mile 1 flyover area and CFC bus stop as they had barely commenced the procession. The operatives arrested one Charles Okurum, a correspondent of Channels Television, who was later released. The journalist who was covering the procession was arrested around CFC bus stop. And that's it. Police protesters clash in Abuja, Port Harcourt, regarding the Cybercrime Act and emergency rule protests by the Take It Back movement. All right, our next story now has to do as well with the emergency rule to some degree. On page 8, a U.S. Law Institute is tasking the president to reverse Governor Siminalayi Fubara's suspension. The United States-based Institute of Law Research and Development yesterday called on President Bola Tinubu to reverse the suspension of Governor Siminalayi Fubara of Rivers State, warning that failure to do so could irreparably damage his legacy. It stressed that such a decision undermines democratic principles and threatens Nigeria's constitutional integrity. A statement by Professor Cyprian Edward Ekpo, who is the director and professor of international environmental and public international law, highlighted that the suspension, along with the subsequent declaration of a state of emergency in Rivers State, could set a dangerous precedent for the country's democracy. And now, the much talked about global tariff war. On page 19 of Vanguard newspaper, federal government will review impact on Nigeria. But I'll read instead from Nigerian Tribune's coverage of that story. It's on page 25. Global oil price. Operators predict low earnings for Nigeria, cheaper petrol pump price. On the front page of Nigerian Tribune, the headline is actually Naira under pressure amid global tariff tension. So it directly relates it to the tariff wars, the Naira being under pressure. But here's what it says. Okay, Nigeria's Naira continued its downward slide on Monday, weakening to 1,629 Naira per dollar at the official exchange market, compared to 1,600 Naira to a dollar at Friday's close. The decline comes amid rising global financial uncertainty triggered by escalating U.S. tariff threats, which have shaken investor confidence and intensified demand for the dollar. Despite the Central Bank of Nigeria's continued efforts to stabilize the currency, pressure on the Naira persists. On Monday, the CBN sold $124 million at rates ranging from 1,595 Naira to 1,611 Naira in an attempt to bolster liquidity. This followed a $197 million intervention on Friday. However, the sustained depreciation indicates that these measures are struggling to keep pace with growing dollar demand and broader market concerns. The Naira also weakened at the parallel market, falling to 1,560 Naira to a US dollar on Monday from 1,550 Naira to a US dollar on Friday. The persistent gap between official and parallel market rates reflects ongoing pressure on the country's foreign exchange reserves and limited dollar supply. Meanwhile, the U.S. is on the brink of a significant tariff escalation with China as President Trump threatened to impose an additional 50% tariff hike unless China withdraws its retaliatory 34% increase. This move is part of a broader trade policy overhaul, which already includes a comprehensive tariff package announced on the 2nd of April 2025. The existing tariffs on Chinese imports have been raised to 54%, with the new reciprocal tariff set to take effect on the 9th of April 2025. Meanwhile, global markets are feeling the impact as Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 1,200 points when trading began on Monday morning, and the S&P 500 was on track to enter a bear market, which means falling 20% from a recent high. Oil prices are extending last week's losses due to growing fears of a global recession, all because the U.S. is throwing a tantrum. That's interesting to me. All right, we have to go, so that's where I'll stop. But you can join us tomorrow for a fresh look at the stories from the newspapers from 8:30. We'll also have a new issue of the day to talk about. My name is Lola Meduteni. Thank you very much.